In this episode with Nic Gill.
So I've worked at all levels of rugby in New Zealand, and you see the differences in the levels. If everyone knows that being a professional athlete has a short lifespan, like some people might be fortunate to have a 15-year career in sport, but most people are probably more like 5 or 6, and so everyone has to be investing into that backup plan. What comes after? Not many get to be professional athletes and then carry on in professional sport and coaching or anything like that. There's opportunities there, but they're few and far between. And so everyone's, across the levels, people are getting advice and help into life outside of rugby, or life outside of sport. So it's, a backup plan or the future planning of what am I going to do when this finishes. I think it should be everyone's responsibility to be doing that, regardless of whether it's high performance sport or just general business. Things change so fast and things can happen really quickly. So having something to fall back on or something to move into, I think's sensible and responsible. But that management group really changed the All Black environment. 2005 and 2006, the environment went from being probably an inexperienced, unprofessional environment and a bad culture to something that was pretty special. So I came back in 2008 and all the hard yards had been done. You can work really hard for money and not enjoy what you're doing. And you might have money now, but you've only got a day or two a week to actually enjoy yourself, and the ratio's all wrong. So, I feel like every day you should enjoy and you should be challenged. You should be able to use your brain. You should be able to learn. Hey, there's going to be periods of time where it's real hard and there's pressure, but that's also exciting and fun when you get through it. So I think just for me, it was very much it just proved that I wanted to do things I loved and wasn't prepared to, I suppose, make home unhappy and be involved in something that I didn't actually really enjoy. So, that's probably my learnings. It's just, and I don't think I've changed since then. I don't think I was different before then. It's just, I don't see the point in being miserable doing something if you can get out of it, if you can make a decision and make choices to do things you love, then you got to do it. Famous phrase, I think it was Steve Hanson's phrase, the old no dickhead policy. You got to be a good person to be a good All Black, and that's still true to this day. Like if you don't have the work ethic, the morality, the ethics of being a good person, you don't tend to stay around for very long. You might make it on your rugby nous and your rugby ability, but you tend to not last.
Okay, Nic, Gilly, thank you for taking time out and coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. You are obviously are well known for being the All Blacks strength and conditioning coach, in my research, I found out there's a whole lot more to you than that. So it'd be good to delve into that. But before we do, my first question relates to the title of this show, Life's Work. I'd like to ask you to summarize, if you can, what you would consider your life's work to be.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully I'm only halfway through, but probably in one or two words, probably a teacher, coach, father, husband would sort of be, not in that order, by the way. What I'd think would be best describe, I suppose, what I've been doing and what I am doing, in a couple of words. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that when you talk about that order, because again, in my research, family is quite key for you, isn't it?
Yep.
I've noticed. So we'll talk about that. So that's good. Thank you for that. So what I tend to do in these conversations is try and establish a little bit of context by talking about you as a younger fellow, about your childhood and your upbringing, where you lived, what the family context was. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
So, born in West Auckland and spent first 17 years out that way. Family of 5, 2 sisters, one older, one younger. And I suppose I went to Massey High School, and pretty tough school. Like, memories of school for me were, I was little, I was skinny, I wore glasses and got bullied a couple of times, and parts of school I didn't like. But as school went on, I sort of found a passion and something that I was good at, which was sports science. And so, and obviously I hit puberty and all that stuff, and all of a sudden grew and stopped getting bullied because I was no longer small. And so that's sort of my sort of real early memories. But I love sport. I love being outside. Still do. And I sort of followed that passion. It helps when you love something, it helps you become good at it. And so that's sort of something I always tell my daughters and people wanting career advice is just follow your passion, because if you love what you do, you'll excel. And so that's what I think happened with me is love sport, loved exercise, love sports science. Went and studied at university and loved learning. And I think that's where my passion for teaching and coaching has come from, is I like to learn. So, the other side of learning is to teach. And so that's sort of what I've ended up doing. I was at university first person to go to university from my whole family, from like all sides of my family. So I didn't think it was a big deal until now. I think it's a big deal now. But both my daughters are at university, so now it's sort of following Dad's footsteps a little bit. But I think that whole 9 years studying, being a student, having lots and lots of different teachers and influences in that time probably shaped me a lot. And then, I sort of went straight into teaching and straight into coaching. So,
where did you find the passion for learning? When did that sort of establish
I
itself?
hated school. I loved school for friendships and playing sport.
Right.
Didn't like the classroom as such. And I remember early days reports, and parent-teacher interviews, and there was 2 common phrases that my parents would come home from parent-teacher interviews with that teachers would describe me: leadership potential, but easily led astray. And and it was very true. Like, I loved having fun. I didn't want to miss out on any fun. So if there was someone clowning around in class, I didn't want to miss out. So I'd sort of join the party. But didn't like study, didn't absorb stuff easily. I had to try hard and work hard to try and remember things or understand things. And still to this day, it's the same. I'm not intelligent. I just work hard. And I think my passion for learning probably came about when I found something I really enjoyed. I didn't like learning things that I struggled with. It was things that all of a sudden I get that. I want to know more about that. I want to try and learn more about that. And then you become inquisitive and I've been involved in research for a number of years, so it's the same sort of thing where you just have questions and you want to understand something a bit more, you want to learn a bit more about something. So that sort of probably really came through 15, 16 when I started really enjoying sports science. In a lot of high school, the back end of high school, you are doing experiments, in the labs and science and biology and chemistry, and I love that stuff. I love sort of, if we mix this with this, what happens? Or if we put a plant in the dark versus in the light, what happens? How does photosynthesis work? Like, I love that sort of stuff. So science and sports science is probably where that I don't know, that learning stimulation came from.
Yeah, the key thing there that I picked up on was that once you found something that you loved, you wanted to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Which, I've read a lot about this kind of stuff over the years where, the school system doesn't necessarily cater for that, or hasn't historically. I think it's getting better over time, and you're in the education system, obviously, as an associate professor. Our standard kind of approach to schooling it's kind of boxes people, or doesn't necessarily give them the opportunities. And I just think maybe sometimes if people had the opportunity to explore a bit more of a wider scope of things, they could find the thing that they're passionate about, and then they're off learning about it, like you've just described. We've done that with our kids in outside of school activities. Let them try everything, and then they find one that hits the mark. I think it's really important, isn't it? Otherwise, the majority of people don't necessarily love learning early in life.
Oh no, you bang on, and it actually goes through your whole life. First of all, schooling, yes, you're boxed into things you must do, and I think the foundations are important. And I know that, like, my daughters went through high school, and it used to blow my mind that a lot of their friends' parents would choose the kids' subjects as to what they were going to do in the next year. And we never did that with our girls. It was very much what do you love, what do you enjoy, what do you want to do? So I think that early exploring lots of different things is really important. Same in sport outside of school, you've already touched on. Early specialisation is just not good, where you just put everything into one sport. All of a sudden you're 25, you've done one sport, you have no interest or love for anything else. That's been and gone, and all of a sudden it's sort of like, oh man, I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have tried that. But even when it comes to, in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s, experimentation is really, really important, with things like exercise, with things like food, with things like sleep. Like, our health changes daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And so we have to have the skills to be able to experiment and figure out, well, actually, I used to like eating like that, but I might try eating like this. I think it's just gold. It's stimulating, you learn, and all of a sudden we're a dynamic organism ourselves as humans. And so what we love, what we like, how we respond to things changes. So you can ingrain that from a very early age. So school's massively important for that figuring out what you love, what really ticks your boxes,
I think what you've just touched on there as well is that really our lives should always be about learning. We should be open to learning right throughout. Because the other thing that I've read quite a bit about recently as well is how good that is for our mental health and brain health.
Yeah.
That the minute we kind of stop learning, our brains start to kind of shrink. So if we're not stretching ourselves in new experiences, trying new things, then there's a cost to that.
Well, I think people get comfortable and they get set in ways, and I definitely feel like as we age, we definitely a little bit risk. Like, we don't like risk as much. We get a little bit more. Oh, I don't want to get in the car to go down to the beach because there's too much traffic, or we want to just be really comfortable. And I think learning is so stimulating for your top 3 or 4 inches. Yeah, and it shouldn't stop. The day you stop learning should be the day you're underground, pretty much.
Yeah. And clearly, from the time you spent at university, you were in it sort of both boots.
Absolutely.
And have continued that. So, but before we go into that in a little bit more detail, you talked about sports and loving sports. What was your sport of passion, if you like, at school age? What were you into?
I loved soccer when I was younger, football. Loved rugby as I got a bit older. And then I sort of dabbled across rugby, cycling, triathlon, sort of depending on the season and things. And so when I was smaller and younger, I loved my triathlon because I didn't have the best hand-eye coordination. Like, I wasn't skillful. I could play cricket, but I didn't love it. So I did play cricket. But I really liked pushing myself physically. So that's where the cycling triathlon came about. And so probably from the age of, I want to say sort of 13, 13 until how old? 13 until maybe 28. I was sort of triathlon and rugby. So probably 15 years of doing both. Got to an okay level in rugby in Australia. But continued just with my triathlon in the background the whole time, and then stopped playing rugby, and just I had a little bit of a breather as the kids grew up and were younger. Time was scarce, and then once they got to a reasonable age, I got back into triathlon and sort of still do now. I love it. I do an Ironman every year, so it's it's a massive passion.
So as a kid growing up, did you know what you wanted to do when you grow up? I still don't actually, by the way, but did you have an idea of what it was that you were going to do in your future?
Yeah, I until about 16, I was going to be a policeman. My dad was he was a prison officer for a number of years. He had a couple of jobs, and that was one of them. And somehow he got involved in the police and was officially called a civil defence officer. And so Dad would go out in the police with the police at night, and just as a civilian, and he'd help them. And so he'd go out at 11 o'clock at night, do the night shift, come home at 7 a.m., have breakfast, have a coffee, be like so high on energy and excitement of the evening he'd had and how much he enjoyed it. And then he'd go into his day job. And so that just influenced me significantly. I just was like, man, that sounds amazing. What Dad's experience, that sounds like me. I want to do that. So I was going to be a policeman. And then I remember at school, I still want to be a cop at this stage. At 15, you get to choose some subjects at school. For school certificate, it was back then. And all my mates were doing woodwork and metalwork. And you still had to do English and maths, I think, at that stage. But anyway, I got pulled out of class one day by our career advisor to say, Nick, why are you doing subjects that aren't going to take you to university? And I said, well, I don't need to go to university. I'm going to be a policeman. And they said, well, are you sure? And I said, well, I think so, yep. And they said to me, sure, this lady said to me, well, let's just explore what you like and don't like. It was an amazing process. I remember it. It changed my life, really. She said, why don't you do one of those subjects that is not university, leading to university, and so do that for a bit of fun, but you need to take some sciences because you're very good at science. And I was like, oh, am I? And she said, yeah, well, your scores say you're really good at science. So I think you should pursue sciences still. They're not going to hold you back from being a policeman, but they'll give you options if you don't become a policeman. I said, okay. So then I did that, and then enjoyed some of the stuff I did, and didn't enjoy the metalwork. I actually didn't enjoy it. All my mates were doing it, but I wasn't very good at it. So I didn't like it. But I was with my mates, so that was important. So the next year I ditched it and went all sciences. And so that was at 16. And as soon as I did that, I was like, actually, I don't want to be a policeman anymore. Like I even did typing at school. So I did typing for 3 years at school, the only boy in my class, because all the policemen friends of Dad said, there's one thing you can do at school to help you be a policeman, and that's learn how to type so your reports are done really fast. So I was like, okay, well, I'll type so I can get my reports done, get out of there. And so stopped typing, went into all my sciences, and that's when I realised actually sports science is where I want to head, and I want to go to the Olympics and work with athletes at the Olympics. Because I didn't think at that stage, well, I knew at that stage I probably wasn't going to get there myself as an athlete, but I still had a little bit of a crack. But that's probably the turning point was probably 16.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that someone else actually created that turning point for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think about where the path that you were on and where you would be today versus where you are. It was an important conversation to have, wasn't it?
It was massive, and that's why I remember it vividly. I mean, I can't remember her face, which is sad because it would be nice to thank her, but I just remember being pulled out of class, and none of my other mates got pulled out of class, so I wasn't quite sure how they picked me to have the conversation with, but it was obviously hugely a big influence on where I headed and where I got to today.
Yeah. And so you went to university?
Yep, down in Dunedin.
Yeah. And so talk to us about that. What was that life like there?
Wow. So I left home at 17. Mum and Dad moved to Waiheke Island my last 2 years of high school. So I commuted to high school from Waiheke Island. Went to Dunedin at 17 and, basically knew no one. Got lost my first day. I was a kid, and grew up real fast, loved it. Met some really good guys from around the country in our first year that are still mates. We catch up every year for a big running mission, and loved it so much. Obviously, talk about it with a lot of excitement and good memories. So both my daughters have gone down there, sort of doing totally different subjects, but just wanted to almost experience what Dad did, I think. Spread the wings a little bit and stand on your own 2 feet and meet people that are all in the same situation where no one knows anyone. Studied down there and wasn't a very good student for the first couple of years because I probably partied a bit much and had too much fun, and as you do, I wouldn't change a thing. And then things started getting a little bit, well, what am I actually going to do? How's this going to help me? So I got a bit more serious and then ended up doing an honours research sort of year in Dunedin, and that's probably where things sort of turned significantly towards the, not academia, but towards the high performance sport. So I was down there for 4 years.
And then after that you did a PhD, is that right?
Yeah, my supervisor at the time, I just said to him, I don't feel like I know enough to go and get a job. At the time, that was the mid-90s, there was no work in high performance sport really, not paid work, or if there was, there weren't many opportunities. There was no professional sports teams in New Zealand, and I knew nothing about America. I didn't really know much about Australia other than the AIS over there, the Australian Institute of Sport. So I sort of said to my supervisor, I don't really know enough to leave the university and work. I didn't feel like I had the skills or the knowledge to go and actually have someone pay me for that. So he suggested I do a PhD. So I applied for scholarships around the world. Well, not around the world, Canada, Australia and Dunedin. And was lucky enough to get awarded a couple, and then I had to choose one. So went and did a 4-year PhD in Australia. Yeah.
It's what you just said then, actually, sort of made me stop. We forget, don't we, just how short a time, relatively speaking, that sports have been professionalised.
Oh, yeah.
Like you say, in the 90s, there wouldn't have been that many jobs, would there?
Oh, there's none. Well, like rugby went professional in 96, so there was no jobs in rugby. And if they were, it might have been an hour or two, and it probably wasn't paid. It was probably you probably got travel, or you probably got some uniform, or there was very little.
So were you thinking at that time that might lead to academic roles as a teacher, or what were you thinking at that point?
No. I was just thinking I don't know enough to get a job in anything. I'm enjoying learning. I want to learn more because I want to I want to learn more and have more skills and expertise and knowledge than everyone else I studied with. There was 300 or 400 people in my degree. So there's 300 or 400, let's say there's 200 coming out with that degree, but there's no jobs. So one, there's no jobs, but there's also 200 people with the same qualification as you. So even if there were some jobs, there's a lot of competition for those jobs. So you had to stand above the crowd a little bit. So no, I do. That's why I stayed at university, is because I needed to know more so I could actually justify putting my hand up for a role or sort of create a role for myself. But at that stage, I had no desire to work in rugby at all. I was just thinking Australian Institute of Sport, because they were getting ready for the 2000 Olympics, which was in Sydney. So the funding for sports science in Australia in the late 90s was massive. So there were roles. There was roles that I thought, hey, I could move into that if I had the qualification and the experience. Yeah.
So a couple of things there. One is, the going on for the additional study because you said that you weren't ready to, or you didn't feel like you could go out and get a job that you're maybe not enough to offer. That's self-reflection. It's pretty good at that age. And then strategic thinking about actually what the future might look like and how can I get ahead of the rest of the pack. Is that how you kind of operate?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm always thinking about what's next or where things are going, and I suppose I don't want to say opportunity, but you are a master of your own destiny. Really, you are in control of a lot yourself, and so I felt at that stage I was it was probably a crossroads of, am I happy being average and just finishing my degree and going out and getting a job in a field that I didn't want to really be in? Or did I want to take control a little bit and actually pursue what I loved? Not take a risk, but put it all into something that I thought might work out. And I didn't see anything negative out of the choices I made, because if I didn't get into sport, I'd probably become an academic. And there's hundreds of universities around the world, so I would have thought, well, maybe I'd get a job somewhere. It might not be in New Zealand or in Australia, but maybe somewhere I'd get a job. So I felt it was sort of not hedging my bets, but investing some time into learning a bit more and seeing where it took me.
Yeah, which is a smart move, really. And for you, it's paid off in both, isn't it, really? Sport and academia.
And by fluke. It was, by absolute luck, I think, but the right place, the right time, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely paid off. Yeah, I love what I do.
Yeah. But I think also having that kind of backup plan, that's more of a feature these days in professional sports, isn't it? That, and I suppose that's what professionalism has done, isn't it, with sports and athletes. It's given them a chance to focus completely on sport, but then after they've kind of run their time in that sport, what next? And, if you think back to when we weren't quite so professional, people were doing sport as well as a job. Whereas now everything's into the sport and what next? So is that a factor that's, big in the sports that you're operating in, for athletes thinking about training themselves and building the skills, knowledge, not just the strength and conditioning, but the mental strength and conditioning and the whole package about what comes after the sport?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've noticed, so I've worked at all levels of rugby in New Zealand, and you see the differences in the levels. If everyone knows that being a professional athlete has a short lifespan, like some people might be fortunate to have a 15-year career in sport, but most people are probably more like 5 or 6. And so everyone has to be investing into that backup plan, what comes after. Not many get to be professional athletes and then carry on in professional sport and coaching or anything like that. There's opportunities there, but they're few and far between. And so everyone's, across the levels, people are getting advice and help into life outside of rugby, or life outside of sport. So it's, a backup plan or the future planning of what am I going to do when this finishes. I think it should be everyone's responsibility to be doing that, regardless of whether it's high performance sport or just general business. Things change so fast and things can happen really quickly. So having something to fall back on or something to move into, I think's sensible and responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are doing your PhD. What was after that? Where you were in Australia doing that?
Yeah, I did my PhD in Australia, and the idea of my PhD was to work with a guru in my field, which was a little bit undecided because I was into my strength and power training and I was into my triathlon. So I was trying to blur the lines a little bit and do some research in that area. So I went to a strength and power guru in Australia. He was the most prolific researcher and scientist in the world at the time. Went over there to work with him, and that didn't pan out. He got sort of sacked from the university, so I ended up having to go a completely different track, which was fine because I still got to learn lots, still published, still got to, I suppose, apply some knowledge and skills that I'd learned along the way to helping athletes. So that's probably the thing I got out of it the most, was it gave me time to grow up, learn a bit more, and then start coaching without having to rely on it as a job. When you're doing a PhD, you get looked after pretty well financially because it's tax-free money. You don't have office hours. It's actually a really cool experience to be a independent learner where no one's checking in on you. You're driving your own learning and learning about research and how to critique research, and I suppose form your own knowledge and opinions from what other people have done. So awesome process, awesome experience. And yeah, I did that for 4 years. And then just before I was finishing, I had an itch to get home to a job. And like you've heard, I've always got the next thing planned. So I hadn't even finished my PhD, applied for a job, got the job. So then I had a job and I hadn't finished a PhD. So I had to finish the PhD while I was in my first job. My first job was teaching at Wintec in Hamilton, teaching exercise physiology and programming and exercise prescription and things. So teaching my passions, teaching what I loved. And because I loved that, I put my heart and soul into teaching. And so it took me another couple of years to actually finish the PhD. I just had to edit it. I had it all done. I just had to edit my thesis, and it took me 2 years to get it across the line. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a bit of a juggling act. And I've had a number of students since then doing their PhDs with me that I've said to them, don't get a job until you finish, okay? Because that's what I did, and it wasn't great. And most of them do the same thing. Most of them get a job before they're finished, and then it drags on. So I can't really say I told you so because I didn't listen to that same advice. So
yeah. So I relate to that, actually. I did the same in my master's. Got a decent job and thought I'll finish it while I take this job. And 2 years later, crossed the line.
Well, that's what happens, isn't it? Because we're doing the postgraduate education to get us into a job that we want to do. Once we get the job, it's like, oh, well, I've got the job. Awesome. And so the postgrad takes a back seat. So, it's pretty common, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're back in New Zealand, in Hamilton. And how long were you at Wintec for?
Oh, I think I was there for 7 or 8 years. Right. And loved Wintec. Had an amazing manager, Gordon Patterson, who actually lives in Tauranga. He's written a couple of cool books, but he was one of my managers, and he was just such a massive influence and supporter of me. I always reflect on why he was so awesome to work for, because it's hard to put a finger on it. But I worked there and loved it.
But have you put your finger on it though? What else? Because I think that's quite key.
He just.
I think a lot of us remember the crappy managers or leaders we've worked for, and the good ones are few and far between. So it's
he just cared. He just cared. And that's all it was. And I felt myself wanting to work harder, just so I got more acknowledgement just from him. As in. I'd be in the office early. I'd be first in the office. I'd be in an office at 7:30. I'd be working away, and then I'd hear the door open, and he'd see my light on, so he'd knock on my office, and he'd have a chat, and then an hour later I'd get an email. How awesome, how much he appreciates how hard I'm working and the work I'm doing, and and if I ever need any, he was just there, always in the background, supporting everything I was doing, because I was trying to challenge the paradigm of, I don't want to just be a teacher. I wanted to teach. I wanted to research. I wanted to work with sports. I wanted to challenge the status quo, I suppose. I didn't want to just be comfortable rolling in, doing my lecture, marking some assignments and leaving. I sort of was there early, I was there late. I wanted to do more than that, and he let me. He didn't try and hold me back. He actually tried to give me a nice gentle push and any support I needed. So I think you know, he was challenging and he was supportive, and I think that's probably the balance. And it wasn't often about the institution, but more about me as a person rather than how it impacted on the institution. So yeah, he was an amazing manager and leader.
You talked there about you wanting to work harder and do more. You know, relating back to what you were saying earlier, though, I mean, obviously he's appreciating you. There's probably a blend there of you wanting to do more for him because he cared about you and was supportive of you. But you were that character anyway, weren't you? That wanted to do more and get ahead and
absolutely.
What's next?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what's next, right? Yeah.
And
I was probably only fitting the norm for 2 or 3 months, as in I was only a teacher for 2 or 3 months, and then I was trying to get work with athletes through it was called the New Zealand Academy of Sport at that stage. So I started getting a little bit of that work, and next minute I was looking after 3 or 4 sports and lots of athletes, and having to ask to do less teaching because I wanted to do more coaching. But of course, someone needed to do the teaching, so they couldn't sort of do that. And then you had other staff going, well, how come Gilly can do all that as well as all that? And Gordon, my manager, would just say, well, he just works really hard. You know, he deserves it. And so that was sort of, that was the early days. And then, how did rugby happen? I was in the staff room, and we had Debbie Strange was one of the teachers in the coaching stream, and awesome coach, awesome lady. And her husband, Chris Strange, was currently working with the Waikato rugby team and the Chiefs rugby team that had just started. And we're having lunch in the lunchroom, and she just started asking me about what I was doing, and you know, you should see if you want to sort of do some, you know, help with Chris and the rugby team. I said, that'd be great. So like the next week I was in with the Waikato rugby team helping Chris, and I just turn up and he just give me programs and I just help coach the athletes. So I just volunteered to help, just get some experience. And I think 2 years after that I was in charge of the Chiefs. Yeah. So I volunteered to help with Chris. Chris sort of gradually finished, and then I took over. And it was just a coffee in the lunchroom with Debbie, his wife, and Chris taught me bucket loads, and I learned heaps from Chris and the athletes, and loved it. And so it sort of went from me being an academic teaching and helping some sports and sports science and strength and conditioning, and then sort of rugby became sort of, I started doing a bit of rugby. That was about 2001 maybe, and then gradually rugby just picked up and teaching dropped off.
So that's that preparation meets opportunity, right? And being willing to kind of step into it and take a bit of a punt, a bit of a risk.
Well, it just fits into what we talked about earlier about just wanting to learn. I just wanted to learn. I just want to get some experience and learn. And I had no expectations at all, which is, I think, is different nowadays with young people. Young people think if they get some experience or volunteer for something, they owed something. I never felt that at all. I was just purely, this is for me. I'm doing this for me. I want to help any way I can because I want to learn. And I never thought about, if I do this really well, I might get some work with you. I never thought that at that time. Yeah,
which is interesting. We've had a few conversations on this podcast about, you know, just wanting to do or wanting to give, but then always receiving back. And I've been concerned about talking about that in some respects, because I think then people do for the wrong reasons. Oh, totally. It's not about doing and then getting back. It's about doing with the right intentions and for the right reasons. And then you get back in different ways, not necessarily in the ways that you want to, but you get back in different ways, isn't it?
I agree. I totally agree. Like I don't think I've ever put myself in a situation like that where I expected something out of it. And so when you go into a situation like that where you're just, okay, I just want to learn here. That's all I want out of it. I just want to learn. I want to open my eyes a little bit and see how things are done. And if by having that opportunity to do that, I'm really grateful. If something comes out of it, fantastic. But at that time, I just wanted to get some experience and see what was out there and learn, because it might help me in my other things I had on my plate. And so I did. I got surprised big time. Yeah, because it opened up massive doors.
Yeah. So when you were at the Chiefs, then were you still teaching?
Yes. Yeah. So over a year at the Chiefs and with Waikato Rugby, I sort of, because the sport had only been professional for about 5 years when I started. And so I was part of that initial transition of amateur rugby through to now. And so every year I got given more to do. And so I think maybe my first year, it might have been a 0.2, rugby role. And so I just juggled that within my teaching. So I was doing a 1.2. And then, went to a 0.3. So then I have to go to my manager and say, okay, I've got a bit of rugby work on now. I need to pull back a bit with the Polytech. And every year we had the same conversation, and rugby just went up and up and up. And I think 2004, I did my first gig with the All Blacks. So I was doing All Blacks, Chiefs, Waikato, and teaching and research. 2004 was nuts. And so that was really the start of me having to go, well, actually, I need to give some stuff up here, and I need to do more of one of them. And so the Chiefs, the Chiefs made me full-time. And so the teaching and Polytech become part-time. So that was 2004.
So how was that? I mean, for you, that's, passionate about sports and sports science and all of that study, and then here you are, in a professional sport. How did you feel at that moment?
Oh, I loved it. Loved it. It was awesome. And I had it wasn't ever it wasn't part of the plan, I'm quite a planned person, but it was never part of the plan. It was just, things just happened really fast. And Ian Foster was the Waikato coach, and he then took me through to the Chiefs. So I was with Fozzie until 2008, and had our two girls, and we were basically, I never let go of my teaching and my research, because that was my learning, and I loved it. I loved my teaching, and I loved helping research students do what I did and supporting their passion and their drive to learn and sort of become sports scientists in their own right, I suppose. So I kept that in my back pocket the whole way through, loved it. It wasn't until what happened, I got the All Black job in 2008, and that was full-time. So I left Wintec, but I wanted to keep doing research. So AUT University employed me as a research fellow. So I was basically full-time All Blacks and a research fellow at the University of Technology up in Auckland. So I kept that research sort of stream going, and have been involved in lots of students' PhDs and still do to this day. So that's sort of where the balance changed, probably 2008.
So talk to me about the All Blacks gig. So because you were there with the All Blacks, I think earlier in the piece, and then
in 2004,
and then not. You chose not to.
So. I left. I did.
Can you talk to us a bit about how? Because I think there's a lot of people who listen to this who are All Blacks fans, right? And they'll want to know a bit more details. How did that All Blacks gig come about? And what was that like for you?
Cool. 2004, the Chiefs. It was our first year with the Chiefs, and we made the semi-finals, I think. We had a pretty good year. It was our first year as a management team, and we did pretty well. And anyway, the All Black staff, the new All Black regime had started, which was Graham Henry, Steve Hansen, Wayne Smith. And so at the end of Super Rugby, that management team advertised for a part-time strength and conditioning coach, an assistant, for the All Black season. So I applied, a lot of people applied, and I got an interview, and I remember the interview, Graham Henry just sort of saying, how have you made the Chiefs look like they're physically peaking every Saturday? Because we played really well every Saturday, and a lot of the other Kiwi teams were falling away over the season, and so he must have thought from his observations as an experienced coach that physically we looked in good place, and so him and the head S&C coach gave me the role as assistant. So I worked with them for their very first test together. So I was with them, and so I was with them for the I think it was the Steinlager series at that stage, which was South Africa and Australia, and the inbounds, which I think was England that year. So I think I did 8 or 9 tests, but they were just starting, and the structures, the culture, everything was really different, and way different to what I thought it would be. It was a lot of boozing of the players. I was trying to, myself and the S&C coach at the time, Graham Lowe, were working our butt off. Like we'd be up until 2 or 3 o'clock every morning, trying to get everything to a place where we felt it was world leading and world class, and we were working our butt off. And we'd win the games, so we were winning. But a lot of the high performance structures and requirements to be the best in the world weren't really being lived. So the culture wasn't great. And to make things harder, I was getting paid not a lot of money. And we had a young baby at home, and my wife was pregnant with our second baby. And so, in a way, had this time away doing my dream job, working for the All Blacks. Wow, I was 20. How old was I? I was only, I think I was 30, 28, 29. So I was the same age as some of the players. And I remember coming home to Hamilton, and after the Steinlager series, and my wife's got our little girl, and we're on the floor in the bedroom for some reason, just talking, maybe just playing with Olivia. Can't remember exactly what we were doing. And she said, "So how was it?" And I said, "Well, actually, I didn't enjoy it. It was hard work, and I just didn't. It wasn't what I expected it to be." And she just started bawling, and I said, "What are you crying for? Like, what's wrong?" And she just broke down. She said, "Look, I've just been put on a brave face. This has been so hard, but I've been put on a brave face because I know it's your dream job, and for you to say it's not what you wanted, it's been so hard." And I said, I'll give up. I'll just get out of it. I just won't do it. You girls are more important." She said, "No, you're not doing that. You're not doing that." And anyway, I spoke to Fozzie, the Chiefs coach. I told him the story, and he said, "You leave the All Blacks and we'll make you full-time with the Chiefs." So it was sort of not an ultimatum, but it was an offer to say, "We want you, and life won't be as hard. We'll look after you, but you just and give up on the All Blacks." So I did. My dad said I was an idiot. He said, "Well, don't leave. No one leaves the All Blacks. Don't leave the All Blacks. You'll never get back." And I said, "Yeah, well, I'll be right. I'll get back." He said, "Nah." And then I remember going away for Christmas, and we had some family friends, and one of the guys said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Don't leave the All Blacks." I said, "It's too late. Already done." He said, "No, idiot." And that was 2004. And I sort of reflect on it now, going, man, I sort of jumped ship. I didn't want to be part of the change because I didn't know there was going to be change, but that management group really changed the All Black environment. 2005 and 2006, the environment went from being probably an inexperienced, unprofessional environment and a bad culture to something that was pretty special. So I came back in 2008 and all the hard yards had been done. So, yeah.
I'd like to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors. I'm really pleased to announce that we have Sharp New Zealand as a sponsor. And it's great to have Sharp on board because as a customer, I can speak about their products and services from personal experience. And it feels good to be able to endorse and recommend a company because of the level of satisfaction we have regarding the services they provide. And across my businesses, we've certainly been impressed with the care and collaboration we've experienced in our dealings with Sharp. It's certainly a brand that we trust. Sharp has a long history of creating breakthrough products designed to meet the needs of people living in New Zealand. Sharp's leadership in technology innovation ensures it's at the forefront of the pack, providing business solutions from printing and photocopying to interactive meeting solutions and ICT phone systems. No matter where you are or what size your organisation, whether you're large or small, Sharp New Zealand can provide their services to you nationwide. If you're looking to upgrade your technology or renew your photocopier leases, talk to your local Sharp team or visit the website at sharp.net.nz. Yeah, a big call though, to take it. Like you pointed out, as a young fellow with a young family, but it speaks to what you were saying before about enjoying and being passionate about what you do.
Yeah,
that's quite key, isn't it? Because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're at work too long, and there's too much cost associated with putting up with that or tolerating that.
Oh yeah. Like I didn't go to university for 9 years to not be able to apply any of my knowledge or skills, and so I felt restricted, constrained, frustrated. It just there wasn't a lot of fun about it. It was just super hard work with not a lot of traction and not a lot of progress. So I think if I had stayed involved, it would have changed pretty quickly. But the fact that we were a young family, like that was the biggest challenge. Was actually my wife. We were only how old were we? We would have been 20, 28, 29. A 4-year-old, 1-year-old. It's sort of like, man, it's too hard. And it might have been different if we were getting paid well, because you might have been able to get some support at home. But my wife's Australian, and so she had no family in New Zealand either. And so it was just don't regret it one bit, because it was the right thing for the family. And the Chiefs were amazing. Like the Chiefs made me full time, and all of a sudden I'm now not travelling away as much. I'm home all the time. I'm rugby 12 months a year, getting paid okay, and the best thing for the family. So it was win-win.
And what did you learn about yourself, through that episode? Because you're a learner, self-reflector. What were you learning about your decision making, about you as a person?
Oh, I think that's probably, we've touched on it around actually doing what you love and enjoying it. Like, I think you can work really hard for money. You can work really hard for money, and not enjoy what you're doing. And you might have money now, but you've only got a day or two a week to actually enjoy yourself, and the ratio's all wrong. So, I feel like every day you should enjoy, and you should be challenged. You should be able to use your brain. You should be able to learn. Hey, there's going to be periods of time where it's real hard and there's pressure, but that's also exciting and fun when you get through it. So I think just for me, it was very much it just proved that I wanted to do things I loved, and wasn't prepared to, I suppose, make home unhappy, and be involved in something that I didn't actually really enjoy. So that's probably my learnings. It's just, and I don't think I've changed since then. I don't think I was different before then. It's just, I don't see the point in being miserable doing something if you can get out of it. If you can make a decision and make choices to do things you love, then you got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly it was the right decision, which was good. Worked out extremely well. And like you said, you were back there in 2008. Forgive my ignorance. Same management team that had made the changes, changed the culture of it. What was it like going back? What was the difference that you were seeing?
Oh, the difference was they'd lost the World Cup, so they were under a lot of pressure when I started. So the guy that was in charge, he left after the World Cup, and so I applied for the job. And because I'd already been there and I'd worked with that management team for 9 weeks, 9 tests, I think that helped me re-get the job, that little bit of experience. And it was very much an environment that had been simplified significantly, and culture had become front and foremost. The environment had become, something that had standards, had values, was all about people, being good people, doing what's required to, as an athlete, as a professional athlete, like no shortcuts, and working hard, and recovering well and eating well, and everything had changed significantly. And part of that was the natural growth in the sport. The clubs had become more professional. The staff and the clubs had become more professional. So it was sort of a culmination of that management team in the All Blacks, as well as the Super Rugby teams becoming better as well. So, things have changed a lot. Alcohol were nowhere near as big a deal as it was in 2004. A lot of the older players in 2004 had gone. So you had some younger leaders steering the ship, and they'd been sort of, I suppose, part of the change. And so it was very different. Yeah, very different. Tough environment. It still is a tough environment. Because the expectations are so high, and there's pressure to win every game. So that was there in 2004, and it was still there in 2008, and it's still there now.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is, you've talked about the culture. I look at the All Blacks and I see it as an organisation. It's easy to look at the 15 blokes on the pitch at game time, and that's the All Blacks. But it's much bigger than that, right? People talk about the team behind the team, but that's kind of almost indicating there's two teams. For me, it's one big team.
Yep.
Is that how it feels when you're in it?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. But it's a big machine. There's there's obviously New Zealand Rugby, which is the organisation, and within New Zealand Rugby, there's a number of teams. The All Black team, it's always been thrown around that there's 50 of us. Okay, so there's the players, the playing group of 30 odd, and then there's a staff of 15 or so. And so I remember in 2008 when I went back, was it 2008? Trying to remember. Wasn't 2008. I remember Richie McCaw, Tana Umanga, those captains of those eras. It was always about 50. We are 50. So the same rules and standards and values that the players would buy into and would live was expected of management. And so, the team is 50 or 52, whatever it is each year. And so, we all are professionals, and we all are expected to perform 24/7. So it's a big group, and it's a big team.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested. I might jump all over the place here, but just as things come to mind. But so you've been involved in that organisation for a long time, 16 years. Yeah. Is that right? It's about 16.
Yeah.
You would be one of the few people that have been the constant in that organisation. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, there's at the moment, so this year, there's about 5 or 6 of us. Yeah, a few of them have been there since 2004. Yeah. So I worked with a number of them in 2004, and then I left and came back in 2008, and they're still there with me now, or I'm with them now. So there's a few of us that have been around for a long, long time. Yeah.
And you've seen management teams come and go, and obviously, during a season, you can see players in and out. How does that culture change, or does it not change? Do you recruit into the culture, and they become part of it, or does the culture change?
Yeah, good question. The culture's always changing, because the people in the team are different all the time. Leaders are moving on every year. We're losing some experienced players that have been there for a long time, and every year it's the same. I'd be guessing, but we probably have every year there's probably a 25% change in players involved through injury or retirement. In the management team, there's every 3 or 4 years there's reasonable change. So coaches, doctors, that's probably where the most changes have been. And so whilst there's certain elements of the team and of the environment that remain and have been part of the fabric of the team for a long, long time, people need to come into that environment, be able to fit, I suppose. There's a famous phrase, I think it was Steve Hanson's phrase, the old no dickhead policy. You got to be a good person to be a good All Black, and that's still true to this day. Like if you don't have the work ethic, the morality, the ethics of being a good person, you don't tend to stay around for very long. You might make it on your rugby nous and your rugby ability, but you tend to not last. So, there's not many second chances given. If you cock up in a big way, it's a big cross against your name for a while. And it depends on how you respond to that as to whether you get back in or not. But definitely we don't change the environment for the people. The people have to have the right attributes to be able to live as an All Black, because we're under the microscope. Everyone's watching. You're role models. You're on TV. You're walking through airports. You're going to schools and you're helping kids. You're doing lots of things in the public eye, and so being a good person is pretty important.
So I suppose that's down to kind of the values of, people talk about, what you do for the shirt type of thing. But, as an organization, it's about like you said, the culture changes when the people change. But there's got to be some kind of baseline or foundation blocks that remain the same, isn't there?
Absolutely.
In order to be able to recruit those people in the first place.
Yep.
And so the good people factor
Yep.
is, I kind of liken that to, in a business sense, you can recruit just for skills and just for experience. But actually, if you can get a good person who's going to fit right in, want to learn, want to grow, you can teach them those things.
Absolutely.
It's harder to kind of try and teach someone to be a good person, isn't it? And fit in with a team that doesn't disrupt the team, the dickhead thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's like skill set's one thing, isn't it? It's only one part of the puzzle. Yeah. You might have the best skill set, but not a good team player, not a good fit. Maybe struggle to be away on the road from your family. Like there's lots of other things that become important rather than just your skills on the rugby park. Yeah. You still need to do your core job, your core role, to world-class standards. So you still need to do that. But you also need those other things. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you're one of the leaders within the team, the organisation. What's your kind of approach to leadership? How do you go about your role working with people?
Yeah, I'm not too sure how I lead. I think all I try to think about is if I was in other people's shoes, how would I like to be led, I suppose. So I just try to be really inclusive. I try to check in a lot with people I work with, and obviously at times pressure's high and fatigue's high, and probably my weak point is that I get blunt and to the point, because time is of the essence. But that's just how it is. I don't think I can change that, because sometimes time is important and we don't have time to fluff around. So, I suppose I just try to be honest, work hard, lead by example, challenge but support, high challenge, high support, and try to stay connected to everyone in our team. I think that person piece, that informal conversations and just hanging out together is really, really important. It's really easy in our environment, because when we're away from each other, like now, there's a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of texts. But when we're together, it was just walking down the corridor and banging on the door, and you can chat to people in your team 24/7. And it's the same for the players. Like the players are the same. It's all about honesty. It's all about trust. And connections. Trying to keep connections high so that those informal conversations can happen, rather than having to sit down and have a proper hard meeting about it. Let's just chat about it on the side of the field. And so I suppose that sort of generally how I approach things.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned there the challenge and support, which you also mentioned with your manager at Wintec.
Yeah.
Do you think you've learned from people like that?
Oh, totally. And I've got lots of people that I've worked with that are very good leaders. Like whether it's players or staff. I thought I've learned lots from Graham Henry, Steve Hansen, Ian Foster, Wayne Smith, Gilbert Anoka, like people that have a lot of years under their belt, a lot of experiences, and have led a lot of great teams. And so you sort of see how they do things, and they all have hard edges to them. Where if sometimes people just need it straight up, it's not good enough, and some people need a little cuddle, and I see that in all of those people I've worked with, that where they've been able to challenge people and just be happy to challenge, and but also at other times be really supportive. And I think that's Gordon sort of taught me that back in my early 20s, and then those significant coaches and leaders have shown the same. Richie's a classic. Richie was high challenge and support yourself sort of guy, I reckon. He just raised the bar and just set high expectations, and if you've got what it takes, you rise to the occasion, and that's what he did, and follow me. So there's been lots of people that have led in different ways that you sort of you learn from, and I suppose role model for you.
Yeah. I suppose what you're saying, Gilly, there is that it's situational leadership, really. We label it as that, right?
Yeah,
So it's what's needed at whatever time for whatever person. It's what they need. There's no one kind of style. Even if you were leading me, I'd have different needs on different days, right? And you mentioned a word there before about care. I think it was in relation to Gordon, actually. You mentioned that care. And I read a book called "Be Exceptional" by a guy called Joe Navarro, ex-FBI profiler. And there's a nice phrase in there. It says, "Leadership is about caring, and to care we must be aware." So we need to understand people, and what you described, getting alongside people, having those informal chats, and just not formal meetings and formal discussions, but just getting alongside people, talking to people. That's how you get to know people, right?
Well, and that's the same for that's for leadership. It's for coaching. It's for teaching. It's all the same. It's every situation and every person needs something different, and you're never going to always get it right. But I think the fact that being aware of that's important. That awareness is really important of what does this person need from me in this situation, and is it a cuddle or is it a kick up the butt, or is it a combination deal? So I think everyone's different, and I think that's the fun, and I suppose coaching, teaching, and leadership is there's lots of ways to skin a cat. But having that appreciation, everyone's different, and every situation requires something different. Pretty important.
How has that changed over the years? I mean, if you think about rugby players, blokey kind of environment, historically, we talk about it these days, don't we? Mental health and well-being. We're not good at opening up and talking about things, but yet here we are. You're talking to us about whether people need a cuddle or not, right? I don't know. It's kind of an analogy, and it might be the case, absolutely. But how's that changed over the years that you've been involved in rugby? Are you seeing a difference now in the way that we are more focused on personalisation and needs of individuals as opposed to one size fits all?
For sure, yeah. Just reflecting on myself a little bit, like when I started, I had no appreciation for that at all. It was, I know what I'm doing. I've been studying for 9 years. Here's your program, go and do it. Don't ask questions, just go and do it. And I sort of thought that at the time, that's what was required from someone in my role was a hard-nosed S&C coach that made people work super hard. That was all I thought I was meant to do. And I think that's because the guy before me at the Chiefs, that's sort of what he did. And so I think I tried. I think that was what I did for my first couple of years, and we got big, fit, strong athletes. but we got lots of injuries. On reflection, probably more injuries than I would have ever liked. But at the time, I didn't know that it was high. And maybe gym athletes, but not rugby players. And so in my evolution, I suppose, and my learnings and my experiences, it's very much every person needs something different. So yes, there's a general need, but within that, everyone's different. And so whether that's physical, technical, tactical, family, diet, whatever it is, everyone's got different needs. And that's probably what I love the most is the challenge is really, really high to try and figure out how to get the most out of each person. And I think the biggest thing for me would be that if players know you care, then they will actually communicate way better with you about their needs. And then as soon as you've got that, then all of a sudden there's trust and you can come up with what's best for them. And I mean, every player I've worked with, I love to bits. You know, like I don't know if I could name 5 players that I haven't enjoyed working with on some level. And so, yeah, I think that's really important is get to know someone, care, open up a relationship where there's trust and two-way dialogue versus one-way dialogue, and then you can figure out what's needed on an individual level. And it's very complicated, it's very difficult, but that's the holy grail, is to have all that sorted for every single person every single day. And generally you're happy enough if you're getting a pretty good plan for each individual for the week that's best for them, you know, and going to produce a good outcome on Saturday.
There's a lot in what you've just said there. I mean, for a start, you know, you were kind of following leadership that had gone before you, and you just kind of in that mold, which I think happens to most people. You become who you hang around with most, type thing. So if you've been led a certain way, you tend to lead that way yourself. So it takes, again, self-reflection and learning to modify that. But what you've just said there as well around how complicated and how difficult it is to look at a team made up of individuals and deliver on their individual needs. It is complicated. It's really hard, isn't it? And if you think about that in the sort of leadership context in business, there's a lot of leaders out there, if not most, who would think that that's not their job or it's just too hard. But here we are, we've got one of the most successful organisations on the planet, the All Blacks. And what you're saying is that, I think that's what you're saying, Nick, is that if you weren't doing that, you wouldn't be the successful
absolutely
organisation that you are.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's only from my side of things. That's only my role with the team. You know, that physical health side of performance, but it goes with our coaches. Our coaches are exactly the same. It's very much you're in the team because you're good at what you do. We care for you. We want you to be the best you can be. How can we help you and support you and challenge you to keep getting better? And so they're the same. And I think we saw that. I mean, I think we saw that and experienced that last year when our players played to save our coach. In South Africa is probably the equal most emotional game I've been involved in 16 years, and that showed how much the players cared for our staff, in my opinion. It was we care for them, and that was them showing us how much they care for us. So very special, very special.
Yeah, that's quite key. I mean, I'm just thinking there, relating that to some organisations that I'm aware of, I've had some involvement with over the years, where when times were hard or things weren't going quite so well and you needed everyone to be on board and trying to work out things, whether they were there for you or not, the employees, the rest of the organisation, was up to how much genuine care you'd showed them.
I was just going to say, absolutely.
You know, and if you're not genuinely caring for them, because I'm being quite specific about genuine there, it's got to come across genuine, doesn't it, for that trust to be there. If there's genuine care, then it works both ways. If not, then it doesn't.
Yeah, well, it fascinates me because genuine being key word there, that when when the pressure comes on, how genuine you have been comes out, and all too often, I'll think back to my own experiences, is that care isn't about words on a wall, or words in a document or an email. It's actually the genuine stuff. It's just the note to say how appreciated you are. It's just the $100 bottle of wine that gets delivered just to say, hey, you're awesome. Doesn't have to be big. It just has to be almost unexpected and genuine, coming from the right place in different situations. And I think that like I watch people that I've worked with that show genuine care, and it's the informal cup of tea. It's just one of the coaches pulling the player aside, just having a cup of tea over in the corner, just catching up. How you going? How's home? Genuine catch up, not a walking off the bus, one of those informal ones I was telling you about, but actually that genuine sit down and how is everything going? Yeah. You okay? Yeah. And I think that's massively important, because, as you say, in an organisation, people will give back what they feel like they've been given, and when pressure's on and things are tough, which is what we experience in a test match, your character shines through, and the care that the athletes have felt will be paid back in spades.
Yeah. Again, there's so much in there I want to go through. There's one thing I just want to say there and relate that to a work context, where I've had it said to me numerous times, where leaders espouse one thing, but when the pressure's on, and that's what you just reminded me of there, when the pressure's on, they revert back to actually what their genuine stance is. So we say one thing's important, but actually when shit happens, you see the truth. And people see through that. It's your actions that speak louder than the words, like you say, the words on the wall. It's that kind of stuff. So it's a nice segue into a question I had around maybe some insight into how the All Blacks kind of, as a team, I'm conscious that you work with other organisations and other teams as well, Nick. You could spend all day talking about this, like you say, but you've got to go out for dinner. But how do the All Blacks kind of train for that? Because what they're renowned for, amongst other things, is working well under pressure. It's 79 minutes and they're behind. They seem to have this kind of equanimity, be able to stay calm and composed under pressure, and then pull it out of the bag. How do you train for that? Is that something you're involved in as well? That's what I wanted to
I think the whole, the performance under pressure piece is something that is talked about often, and it's another holy grail that everyone's trying to chase, because a lot of performance, whether that's in the business world or in sport, a lot of people can perform well when there's no pressure, and then all of a sudden there's pressure and time restrictions, and people can either try a bit hard or crumble, and so I think that a lot of that isn't about how you prepare in the week, but actually about the athletes that you've got and their experiences that they've been through themselves, and then what learning we've taken from some of those experiences. The fact that the All Blacks have won lots of games in the last minutes probably creates a belief in our group that, don't worry if at 75 we're behind, we can still win, because we've done it so many times. So there's this belief that we will perform right up until the final whistle, because we've always done that. So that's part of the legacy of the team, I think. And so I suppose creating the team, investing time into creating a team where people trust one another, because that's what happens under pressure, is people try to do it themselves because they might not trust someone else to do it. Whereas in the All Blacks, there's a lot of trust in players on your left and right shoulder, so you don't have to try so hard to do it by yourself. You've just got to trust the team and trust the process. And if everyone does their job, we'll be okay. So that's talked about a lot. It's talked about a lot. Do your job, and know that your mate on your left and on your right, they'll do their job. And so, in lower levels of performance or in lower level teams, good people or good athletes or good workers might have to do more than their job, because people either side of them aren't quite as good. But in the All Blacks, everyone's really good. And so you can just focus on, if you do your job right, that's all you have to do. Do what you are responsible for. And I think that's what builds 80-minute performances, is trust and you just nailing your role. And I think, there's lots of other reasons why we win games in the last couple of minutes, but I think that's probably one of the big guiding principles, is just do your own job and trust the others to do theirs.
Yeah. So one of those other reasons that they do so well is probably down to your role, to be fair, strength and conditioning. Can you talk to us a bit more about that, about what that looks like? What is your role? How, sort of do your job. What is your job within the context of the All Blacks?
I sort of stick to my knitting. My role has evolved. It's changed over the years as I've been there for longer and longer. But I suppose my role at the moment is I lead the health and performance team, which is doctor, physio, manual therapist, nutritionist, sports scientist. Excuse me. So I lead that group, and our role is to have the athletes physically ready to rock and roll come kickoff. And so that means preventing injuries. That means training hard and smart to get fitter, faster, stronger, more powerful. That means recovering well from hard sessions. That means I work with the head coach and the manager around our schedule, what day we're training, morning, afternoon. If we're traveling to Argentina, when are we going to go? When do we get there? What are we going to do? So I sort of help put the schedule together. Work with the coaches on the content on the field, what we're going to do, how long for, how hard are we going to do it for, and then obviously working with individuals on their own plan within the week. So yeah, really, I suppose I'm a strength and conditioning coach that has involvement across the whole group. So, me and the physio and I work really closely together. I'm very hands-on. A lot of people in my sort of role would be more of a manager leader versus being hands-on, but I write all the programs still. I do all that myself. And part of that's because I used to think it was because I was a control freak, but it's actually, I really enjoy it. I love knowing exactly what every single player is doing and why. I've written the program, I've written the plan, I'm the one coaching them. So if any of the coaches ask me about a particular player, I've got my finger on the pulse for all of them, because I'm doing most of the work with them. I love the hands-on, and I won't step away from that unless they drag me away kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I suppose if you're working in conjunction with the head coach, you need to know, in order to be able to give advice in the direction of the head coach, you need to have your finger on the button, don't you, and know everything there is to know, which means, like we were talking about before, you need to be hands-on, but you need to be close to and understanding how people are performing to plan, what's going well, what needs improvement. I mean, I suppose as well down to monitoring players during games.
Yep. Yeah.
With the technology that we have these days.
Oh, totally. We have so much information on them. It's I get information now. Like I'll be at home this weekend watching the rugby, and we get GPS information on them the next day. So living here in Tauranga, and I still got information on all the players that play on the weekend on my computer. Who's worked hard, who hasn't, who's injured, who's not, what's everyone's body composition looking like at the moment. What do the gym programs look like? So we've got all that information at our fingertips at the moment. It's pretty cool. So there's no reason not to have very detailed individual plans when we know everything about the individual. And so lots of information, and then we've got to try and filter out the through all that data what it actually means for us going forward. Create some go forward. Yeah.
So I mean, in relation to the players, they're the assets of the organisation, I suppose, aren't they? And you've got to look after them.
Yep.
It's about, like you said, your role is keeping them in top shape so that they can perform at their best when needed. How difficult is it to make a call that maybe someone's not quite fit, or we shouldn't risk them I mean, I think it's different when we talk about head injuries and things like that. It's kind of probably, I think, maybe taken out of your hands anyway because of independent assessments and things. But if someone's got a niggle or a strain, or they're not quite, maybe their head's not in the right space, how difficult it is when you what these players can give during a match to make the call to not put them on.
Yeah, it's not that difficult because if we've got all the facts, then there's a conversation had between the head coach and the doctor generally, or the head coach and my team, the physio, myself, and the doctor around where someone's at, and it's either a blanket, he's unavailable, or he's got this issue. It should be okay, but it might not be. So there's risk. Do we want to take the risk, or are you happy to make a selection change? And so we try to stay out of the selection piece. It's important that we are removed from the selection piece, the health and performance team. We're very much here's the facts, here's the information, and this is our thoughts, is our recommendation, and then the coach can make the final decision. And generally, like all the coaches I've been involved with, if a player's at 70, 80%, and we've got someone who's at 100%, they'll pick the fit person, the person that's fine, knowing that therefore the risk will be lower, and next week that other player will be good to go. So the element of selection required, and there's balance of the squad, there's risk reward. What does that player bring at 80% from a leadership perspective, even though physically they might not be up to scratch? So yeah, I think as a medical group, we have to present the facts with a recommendation, and then the coach will make the final decision. And generally, they are on the money. It's all about performance. We need to have the best players out there, the fittest, healthiest group.
Yeah, I suppose maybe I'm making an assumption here with the professionalism of the sport over the last few decades that you're picking from a squad of they're all excellent players. It's not like
That's right.
Back in my day when I was playing that you were on the bench because you were nowhere near as good as the people who were picked first. It's not like that, is it? So
it's not like that in the All
Blacks. It's not
Blacks.
as much of a risk.
No, it's not like that in the All Blacks. It's like that in other teams where players might get rolled out because the next player isn't anywhere near as good as you, and you might get rolled out again and again and again, even though you've got a couple of niggles. They aren't dangerous. Like, let's be clear, they're not. They're just niggles where you're not functioning as well as you could. Yeah. But that's rugby. Rugby, it's a contact sport, so people have always got something that's sore. Whether it's a broken finger or a tight muscle or a bruised quad. Everyone's carrying something at some point in time, and I think that at the All Black level at least. Often you got some really good depth. Yeah. And so you're not forced to put players out that shouldn't be out there. Sure.
Can I ask you a question about going back to the culture piece? Or just something that came to mind there about, having that trust within the organisation, within the team. Simon Sinek talks about the circle of safety, so that we're all kind of looking after each other, we've got each other's backs, so we can focus on the external forces, the opposition. But being an All Black is, it's a highly competitive space. And as you've kind of alluded to there, that, you might be in for a while, but there's no guarantees about how long you're going to be in there for. Yep. So is that a constant kind of concern for players, or is it basically you're in and you're absorbed by the culture? Because the reason I'm asking is, in my mind, naively maybe, I could see like the competition might interfere with the trust.
Within the squad, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, completely opposite. It's everything is about the team, right? And so something that blows my mind still, when I watch the All Blacks train, is that often we've got players in the same position. They're trying to be the number one in their position. So let's talk about halfback. 3 halfbacks. We always have 3 halfbacks, and at any opportunity they have, the 3 halfbacks will be helping each other get better, because team comes first, and so they behave in a way, and it's really organic as well. because young players experience it, when they become experienced players, they model the behaviours that they were showing. So the three halfbacks will, any opportunity they get, they will help each other become better. So what that looks like is after training, the three of them will get together and they'll help each other improve their pass. And it sort of defies logic a little bit. Like, why would I help you if I want to take your spot? But how they behave is that actually it doesn't matter who's out there as long as we win. So I'm going to help you be better than you are now so that the team wins. And so it's a beautiful thing to watch in my eyes, where the competition for the spot, it's always there, but it's exhibited out on the park when they're playing. They're trying to do better than their teammate or than the guy that they're competing with, but until, like, outside of the game, they're trying to help each other grow and be better, whether it's physical, technical, tactical. It's pretty special. I don't think you'd see that in many industries.
No, I'm just trying to kind of relate that back to, business and workplaces. It's quite rare, isn't it, I suppose?
Absolutely. Like, often in businesses, people are competing and not thinking about the overall outcome for the company. They're thinking about themselves and their climb up the ladder and their earning potential, Sure. And I think that, maybe partners in a firm might work really well together to try and in the better interest of the firm. But, it's pretty special to see, grown men helping each other be better, even though they're competing for the same spot.
Look, I'm conscious of the time. But I do want to ask, you've talked about, caring, and your approach to leadership, and your role is really about understanding people extremely well, so you've got to be close to them. It's naturally an organisation where there's comings and goings. And I imagine that, you've got a group of guys there at one point in time, and then someone doesn't get selected, they don't turn up. How does that for you in your role, when you've got these close relationships with people and then they're not there? How's that?
It's probably the hardest thing of the team, really. Like, there's not many players you get to say goodbye to. So not many players finish off their own back. Like most World Cups, we know who's leaving. Some years we know who's leaving. But a lot of players just don't get reselected. So then they leave. So there's never a goodbye for lots of them. So it's pretty tough, like tough on them, tough on us, but what does happen though is it's like all of a sudden that person's no longer there, but now we've got this new exciting new person, and sort of all of a sudden you got a new 5 or 6 people come in. So it's a sad part of the team, because often the same team may never be selected again after one game. Like that team may never play again together ever. It's interesting. World Cups, like this World Cup, I think we've got 6 or 7 guys that'll be their last game in the All Black jersey. And so, those become quite emotional times, because typically those players have been around for 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years. That's why, I think 2015 World Cup was pretty special, because we won the thing, and it was about 8 of their last game. And they won, top of the world, and they left finished. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do the same this year.
I was going to ask you for a prediction. So that's your prediction. Obviously, I mean, you're not going to say
not my
anything
prediction.
else,
It's my hope. It's our desire. It's obviously something we all would love to do, would be to send some of our legends off in style and finish a pretty tough 4-year cycle. It's been a pretty crazy 3 years with COVID and being locked out of New Zealand for 4 months, and it's been pretty crazy.
Absolutely. There's so much more I would like to ask you, Gilly. You've given us so much. I'm grateful for that. But there's so much more I could delve into if we'd have had all day to do it.
That's all right.
So I'll just finish off with, we've talked about and touched on. You're a person about what's next. You mentioned as well that you're kind of only halfway through your career, which is good outlook to have. And like you said, you started with the All Blacks very young. You were as young as the players, so you have got a long way ahead of you. What is on the horizon for you? I mean, obviously you've got the World Cup coming up, but is there anything else in any other direction that you're looking to? Are you happy where you are and just pushing on with that, or are there other things that you'd like to do? And unfortunately, we've not been able to touch on some of the other things you do. But yeah, is there anything in particular that you're focused on for the future?
Not really. Like I mean, there's probably two things. First thing is, yes, focused on World Cup this year. We kick off in a month, and so I can't wait. Massive challenge. It's going to be awesome. Then after that, I'm lucky enough to be carrying on. So that's going to be another challenge with another group of people. And then after that, who knows? I'm still loving what I do, and I keep asking myself, and am I still loving it, and am I still doing a good job? And the answer to both those questions, I think at the moment, is definitely yep. I'm still loving it. Still can't wait to get back into it. And feedback I've had is positive, so that as long as those two boxes are ticked, then I'll keep doing it. And I just love teaching and coaching and I suppose learning. So I'll just keep doing those three things, and hopefully other opportunities pop up along the way. And we did think about going overseas for a little bit, my wife and I, because the kids are left home. But that's not in the immediate future, that's for sure.
Well, whatever you do, I wish you all the best, and all the best for later this year. Thank you again for giving up time to come and talk to us today. I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. That time's flown by.
Yeah,
like I said, I could. Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel. I've got so much more to ask. You'll have to come back and do it again.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
But yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
As you'll hopefully know by now, if you've seen other episodes, this segment of the podcast is all about wisdom worth sharing from our guests who've been living a life that's a story worth retelling. At the end of every interview, I look back as part of the editing process and discover some of the gems that came out during the conversation and summarize them here. Okay, so where should I start with the wisdom worth sharing from Nic or Gilly? There was almost too much wisdom to share in this, what's supposed to be a short section at the end of the podcast. So I'll try and pick out some key bits that piqued my interest. But if you haven't already seen the full episode, I recommend that you do so. Gilly said, "I'm not intelligent, I just work hard." Clearly, he is intelligent, as was evident with some of the wisdom that he shared with us. But there's no doubt he also really worked hard as well. He would start early and finish late, always willing to put in the extra hours and go the extra mile. At the university, he did what it took to be ahead of the competition, to stand out above the crowd of 300 other students, all trying to get a shot at the few jobs there were back in those days when the sport wasn't professional. As a teacher at Wintec, he would work hard to win the favour of his manager, who he looked up to and admired because of his leadership approach. By doing so, he was able to negotiate shifting his hours from teaching to coaching as the need for that increased. Someone who turned up and did the minimum wouldn't have been given the same level of opportunity, I'm sure. In sport, it was the same for Gilly. He volunteered to work with the Waikato rugby team because he wanted to learn. And as a result of that willingness to do the things for the right reason, 2 years later, he found himself leading the strength and conditioning for the Chiefs rugby franchise. Gilly said that when you love something, you become good at it. And that makes sense. Because when you're passionate about something, you're more inclined to spend more time on it. You become better as a consequence, which then leads to more opportunities. And the cycle continues. You become better, you enjoy it more, and so on and so forth. It's a positive spiral in the right direction. So, It really is important for us all to find something that we enjoy doing, because surely the opposite is also true. If we don't enjoy something, we won't put the same amount of effort in, and so we're not likely to become as good as we could be. And that becomes a negative spiral, potentially in the wrong direction. This is true for all aspects of life, and none more so, in my view, than work. If we're not enjoying work, what can and should we do about it? Talking of work, and more specifically leadership, I enjoyed what Gilly had to say in this area. Clearly, he's a good leader, and of course, his approach is effective, as can be seen by the performance in general of the All Blacks since he's been involved for the last 16 years or so. So personally, I think that we can't go far wrong in looking to Gilly and the All Blacks as an organisation if we want to know what good leadership looks like. Gilly himself stated that since being with the All Blacks, he had changed his views on the approach needed over the years. He set it out following in the footsteps of his predecessor, which is a natural thing for anyone to do. We're creatures of our environment, of course. But unfortunately, it's not always the best thing to happen. Gilly is a self-reflective person, and he was able to establish that what he was doing with the players was contributing to the injury rate. He said that he had players who were good for the gym, but not necessarily for the playing field. This alone, I think, gives us an indication as to the kind of leader that Gilly is. It's not easy for leaders to reflect and admit that they've got it wrong, which is why it rarely happens, and why I believe we have poor workplace cultures across the globe. Being open to learning, but also admitting that you were wrong, or just that you could be better, isn't just for the players and employees. It should be led by the leaders of any organisation. As Patrick Lencioni talks about in his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it requires leaders to engage in vulnerability-based trust to create the foundation for a great team to exist. That means admitting our fears, failures, and mistakes. Gilly learned a lot about leadership from his manager at Wintec and summed him up by saying he just cared. His manager was challenging and supportive, and this was something that Gilly talked about at the All Blacks. High challenge, high support. Good leaders are willing to do both, not just one or the other. I've talked with leaders recently who care for the people they work with, but they're less inclined or willing to challenge, or they could be just less confident in doing so. The reality is that both challenging and supporting are showing that you care. If we are not challenging people to meet the standard or expectations, or as the case may be, to stretch to new standards, we're not doing them any favours. Gilly said that the biggest thing is if players know you care, they communicate way better with you about their needs. And all of a sudden, there's trust. And you can come up with what's best for them. He would say to the players, you're in the team because you're good at what you do. We care for you. How can we challenge and support you to keep getting better? The consequence of this is significant. The players then respond in the same way. Gilly said that he saw that last year when the players played to save their coach. They showed how much they cared in return. I've witnessed this in organisations I've worked with over the years, but primarily I've seen the opposite. When employees don't feel the trust, they're less willing to step up when the organisation needs a concerted effort. And it's important that the care shown is authentic. We've probably all had experiences of leaders espousing one thing, but when the pressure comes on, how genuine they are comes out. It's not about having words on a wall, as Gilly put it. It's about showing that you care consistently. I think another important point that came out of the discussion was the no dickhead policy in the All Blacks environment. It's not about caring so much about individuals that you upset the rest of the team. It's the opposite of that. If individuals aren't team players, they don't fit in, they don't belong, and as Gilly said, they don't last. The same should apply for workplaces. I see this often where managing leaders are either nervous about taking the action needed themselves and hope it will just sort itself out. I've been there myself, to be honest. Or they know that something needs to be done, but their organisation is risk averse. It's about balance, like everything. But we need to do the right thing for the organisation, for the majority. When we do this and prove with our actions that we care about the team, we can get amazing cultures that thrive. Gilly said that it blows his mind that often players who are in the same position, trying to be the number one option for that shirt, any opportunity they have, they're helping one another get better. He says it defies logic a bit. Why would I help you if I want your spot? But their attitude is, it doesn't matter as long as we win. Now, the question for those of us who don't work in high-performing sports teams is, how could this be translated to work? It's the culture and the leadership approach within the All Blacks that creates that kind of environment, that kind of attitude. So what do our leaders need to do in our workplaces to try and replicate some of this? Simon Sinek refers to the circle of trust, where we don't need to focus on protecting ourselves from each other, so we can focus on doing what's best for the organisation. It's a significant challenge, but if we work towards that, who knows what we could achieve. Hopefully, you've been able to take many insights away from this interview that you can apply to some aspect of your life, work and legacy. Use it, share it with others. As Gilly said, the other side of learning is teaching. And as I say, teaching helps us retain what we've learned and commit to change, which is necessary if we to enhance our life's work. I hope that you're happy, safe and successful in all that you do. And remember, live a life that's a story worth retelling. I'm Steve Worsley, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Life's Work, the podcast all about wisdom worth sharing.